Okay, so welcome back. This is going to be a fairly brief video talking about something a little bit off topic from the other things we've been talking about. And this is about a very wonderful professional grade and free video editing software. And it's called Davinci Resolve by Blackmagic is the name of the company. And it's really wonderful for those who are doing YouTube videos or anything like that. It's a great free way to edit your videos and get them, prepare them for posting up on YouTube. However, as with any really complex piece of software, every once in a while you will come up with a challenge that, even though there's tons of good resources on the internet about how to use this, every once in a while you come up with something that is just totally counterintuitive. There's nothing really on the internet, or it takes a long time to try and figure out. So I've got something here that I thought it took me, there's a few things in here that are totally counterintuitive and took me a long time to figure out. So I'm hoping I can help someone with the same issue and get it fixed fairly quickly. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at applying a blur effect in Davinci Resolve. And what I'm doing, I'm starting out here with a very simple series of clips. I've only got 2 clips here, and they're just random clips. I use some introductory clips from some videos. And what I want to do is apply a blur to, for example, this electricity word in this title. But I only want to apply it after the clip has started, after a few seconds. I then want the blur effect to go on and have it last for a few more seconds and then go off. And then you can see I've got a second clip here, and I want to do the same thing in the second clip. And you can see it's going to go to the second clip, and I want to do the same thing to this part of the title. So I want one blur effect that lasts through 2 clips. And if you're familiar at all with video editing, you know that this is going to involve something called keyframing. All right? A keyframe is basically a marker at some point in your video where you can change settings on the effects or the colors or the placement or whatever you want. A keyframe sets a point on your video, and it basically stores your settings at that point. And then you can move a couple frames, change the settings, and it stores those. And it allows you to, for example, what we want, to get into the video a little bit and then suddenly turn on a blur and then go a little further, turn it off, then keep going, turn it on again, and turn it off again. So there's a couple things here we're going to have to figure out how to do. And unfortunately, some of this stuff is fairly counterintuitive. So what we're going to do is first figure out how am I going to put a blur on, all right? So you can see down here on the bottom, there's a bunch of different areas that you can do work in Davinci Resolve. And we're going to go to the color section, the color tab. And you can see I've got some color wheels over here. I can adjust colors. And here I've got a node, which is basically where you apply effects to your video. And every time you want to apply an effect, you add another node, and you can kind of set your effect with that node, and you can change it and delete it, whatever. So the first thing we're going to do, here's our starting node where there's no correction. And we're going to do an add node, and it's a serial node, which means it's next after this initial node. Okay, so now we've got this initial node, and on this node we want to apply the blur. So how do we apply the blur? Well, you can see down here this window it's called power windows, and they give you areas, movable areas and resizable areas where you can limit your effect to. All right, so we want to have like a square blur. So I'm going to come up here and click the square, and you can see up here in our clip we've got this square that comes up, and I can adjust it. I can make it narrower by bringing this down. Okay, and I can make it larger. And now that we've got it set for the area we want to blur, we're going to have to figure out how to do the blur. We've defined the area, now we've got to get the blur effect. And if you go up here, you've got these resolve effects. And you got a bunch of these blurs here. What I'm going to do is just click and drag this box blur and apply it on our effect. And you can see, boom, it's done. We've got the blur effect, and you can change the strength. You can vary the strength, horizontal and vertical, whatever you want to do. So cool, we've got our blur. Now, the problem is we don't want that to stay on. See, if I go to the beginning of the clip and I go to the end of the clip, it stays on. And let's say I want to turn it on like right here. Well, the question is, how do I apply a keyframe at this particular point so that I can turn off the blur before this point and turn it on after this point? Well, that's what had me struggling for a long time. So here's the box blur settings. And you would think there would be a simple keyframe button that you could press here to keyframe it and to change the value. Like here's an on and off. I can turn it off, I can turn it on, and off and on. So you'd think I'd be able to easily keyframe that at this point and just hit a keyframe here and then turn it off and on subsequent frames, and it would turn the blur on. Well, not really. What I found out is it's down here at the bottom, this global blend, okay? So this is what you can keyframe. And you can see this little diamond here is the keyframe button. So what I want to do is I want to set, at this point, I want it to be off prior to this point here, okay? So I set the motion blur, I turn it off by this slider, and then what I want to do is I want to set a keyframe right at this point. Now, the other counterintuitive thing here is that the setting that you change, that you keyframe to turn the blur on and off, is this blend setting. And you can see as I adjust it, it changes the amount of blur, okay? But what's strange is that at 0, it's full blur, and at 1, it's 0 blur. So, you know, what you want to do is you want to put it to 0 blur, which is 1, hit this button, and that will keyframe the value, all right? So I have just keyframed at this point that it will be 0. Everything prior to this point, there will be no effect. So now what I want to do is hit the arrow, the right arrow key, and you can look down here and you can see I went from frame 46 to frame 47. So at that point I want to turn on the blur. So then what I do is I run it down to 0, and you can see now the blur is on. So it automatically keyframes this triangle, this diamond turns red. So now if I zoom it back, prior to that, you can see I've turned it on. I've turned it on at that point. Okay? So that's how you do it. So now let's go towards the end of the clip, and I've got it. I want to keyframe it as full on, which is 0. And then the next frame I hit, and I went from 35 to 36, and I want to turn it off. So now I'm all set. I've keyframed, I made 4 keyframes. Off, on, and off, okay? So you can see as I zoom through this, it goes on and off. So cool. Now I just want to do the same thing for the next portion of the video. So let's scroll this down to the end of this clip and press forward. And you can see now I'm on the next clip, but wait a minute. What I had before, which was this blur effect, suddenly it doesn't exist anymore. So wait a minute. What happened to my blur effect? Do I have to start from scratch and make another blur? You know, go down here, make another blur and adjust it and apply. Well, that took me a long time to figure out. In fact, it's a very, very simple answer that all you need to do is hit the equals key on your keyboard, and it will then apply that blur node to this next subsequent clip. Okay, so I've got two clips, and I just want it to it basically copies and pastes it over to this new clip. So now I'm on the new clip, and it does the same thing. It does relative keyframes. So what I can do is I can go here to the to adjust the keyframes, the point at which I want the keyframes, or I can just leave it. But hopefully that gives you an idea on how to do a simple keyframe. Now I'm not talking about tracking. A lot of people like to talk about tracking, where you have motion and the blur can follow that. You can find that on YouTube, a lot of videos on tracking, but this is just a simple keyframing a blur. Again, to keyframe it, you go to Global Blend, and to make it copy and paste to subsequent clips, you just hit the equal key and it will copy and paste. Anyway, I hope this helps. Take care and have a really good day. Thanks.